guys. So, as Sally said, I'm actually, well, where I started was as a personal trainer. So, my background coming into tech was not from a place of really being interested in tech, funnily enough. I would not list it as like one of my hobbies and interests. I, truthfully, over the last 3 years, have had like a crash course in tech. But up to this point, I really didn't know anything. I knew health sciences and I worked with women predominantly, and they had problems with their health. They had problems with their menstrual cycles, and I was just trying to find a solution for them and a way to help them. So that's really where Femtek was born. You want me to swipe? Space. All right. Awesome. So unlike what a lot of the other startups are, which I found Australia loves a B2B SaaS, Femtek actually has a hardware component. So hardware is hard. I heard it 1,000 times. We're a wearable. So we wear it overnight and it's a smart ring. So it's just worn on your finger. And what we're doing is collecting biometrics. So your first thought might be that, okay, well, there's a lot of things that can actually collect your biometrics. The point is that all of these wearables are actually built on men. So when you look at the research, women have been excluded from research for a really long time. When you look at how these wearables are made and the production process of them, we don't actually think about women throughout the process. When we look at software only models as well, that's where we're actually looking at software that isn't factoring in all of the conditions and all of the variances that we actually have with women. So we're really categorizing women as a really binary category of just woman. Whereas when you actually look at some of the statistics surrounding menstrual health issues and the statistics of what happens with women, they're actually quite staggering. All of these women deserve support when it comes to a software model, and they're let down with their current period tracking apps. So what a period tracking app does and what it looks at is essentially it's a calendar. It's a paid calendar, and we've been gimmicked into paying for this paid calendar. When you look at temperature data, so this is where the biometric component comes in with Femtek, right? We're tracking your biometrics overnight, and we're looking at that in relation to your menstrual cycle. When you look at temperature data from over 600,000 cycles, the luteal phase actually ranges from 7 to 17 days. Now, that's a big difference. And what period tracking apps do is they give you a 14-day luteal phase, because that is what Western medicine teaches. That's what every textbook teaches. That's what every single graph you look at for a menstrual cycle teaches you. 28 days, day 14 ovulation, 14-day luteal phase. What Femtek actually does is it encompasses the entire life cycle of a woman. So we're going right from pre-pubescent to menopause. So from 2 stages where there are no menstrual cycles, but for very different reasons. And we're factoring in hormonal conditions, what the goal is, and what birth control is actually used. Because all of these things should dictate a different user experience from a period tracking app and period recommendation app for women. We're not just a period tracking app though. So when you actually look at what our app does, and what we're giving women in terms of cycle support, cycle training, and nutrition, all of these things are heavily overlooked and important. This is the one that I'm actually most excited about because it's that SaaS which VCs are going to love. But this is our partner Pulse, and this is our really fun tongue-in-cheek way of bridging communication barriers and gaps between couples. I wear my ring, I log that I started my period and I have period pain. My beautiful boyfriend gets a notification that says, Olivia started her period, make sure you stop at Coles and buy some chocolate and some painkillers. Because what do we know about men? They have great intentions, but they just need a little gentle nudge sometimes. When you look at it from the serious lens as well, we're also talking about infertility and what happens with a lot of couples when they go through into infertility. Sex becomes transactional. So we remove that barrier and that conversation of let's go make a baby and put it into an app and allow you to actually have fun with your partner again, where you don't have to have those conversations. We hear a lot of men saying when we actually went to IVF, it was a relief. I didn't have to know, I no longer had my partner saying to me, hey, let's go make a baby. I'm ovulating. Let's go. It was fun all of a sudden. So when we actually look at the data science that's gone into this, it's really hard to explain just how much proprietary knowledge has gone into this build, because when we look at the research and what women have been excluded from, this is where Femtek stands apart. I've spent over a decade working with women, and when I say it's 30,000 hours, because I've actually worked it out, people are always like, that doesn't make sense, 5 days a week, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. But the amount of time that I've actually spent working with women, one-on-one, hands-on, this is where we actually get to build our own data. So we can say that we have evidence-based work, and we can also say that evidence is lacking in a lot of ways, but this is where we get to create our own evidence. And this is really awesome, because when I think about the future of women's health and I think about the future of what we can contribute to women's health through the fact that we're able to collect data and also create parameters surrounding what each of these women and archetypes is actually providing, there is so much research that we can look at in terms of breastfeeding and how training impacts that. We can look at women who have endometriosis and infertility, and when they started to see changes in their heart rate variability, what that resulted in. There's a lot of data science that can come from this, and I'm really excited to get my teeth into it. We'll actually have rings on fingers at the end of the month, so that's when we'll be able to know a hell of a lot more about our customers and who has already pre-ordered. And that's a really exciting thing for me in the future. In terms of hardware development, this has been and honestly, how long do you guys have to listen to me bitch and moan about this? From someone who had no hardware experience, and I had no idea what I was doing when I started this. I still don't think I have any idea what I'm doing, but maybe like a little bit more. When I started this, I really had no idea. I was under the assumption that, well, you have women who like start activewear labels and they just go to a manufacturer and they kind of work it out together and it's all good. It doesn't work like that apparently with hardware, which I learned the hard way. Choosing the wrong team at the start of this journey cost a lot of money, cost us a lot of mistakes. The main thing that I learned over that time was that even though you can have someone who is a really good mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, name the engineer, software developer, whatever it is, if they're not a startup specific engineer, they are going to fuck everything up for you. They are going to create designs that take a mold tool from $10,000 to all of a sudden $100,000, which is what happened with us. They created designs which were awesome, but weren't fit for purpose for a startup that doesn't have that budget to drop $100,000 on mold tooling, which was another thing we then had to work through to actually go back and go, shit, what can we change now with the design to be able to manufacture this? Because those non-recurring engineering expenses ate us alive in that start. So this was a really shit part in the development. It wasn't as fun for me personally. We went through several PCB changes, and when we thought we had the last one, I was like, great, you know what? We've got 20 units that we need to get out to do testing, do a prototype run. I'll sell my car. I'll do the whole founder story. I'll sell my car, get these PCBs out, and then we can launch. And then half the PCBs didn't work, and we had to redesign everything all over again. And that was just such a kick in the guts, because I truly was like, we're there. We're at that finish line where we can finally go to market. We'd had some angel investment to that point. I had bootstrapped as well. And I really thought that we were at that point where we could go to market and have sales. And it didn't happen. And then we launched, a few months later. But that was a really difficult part in terms of the hardware development side of things. And it's, you look back at now 3.5 years later, because this has been going since 2020, how much sooner we could have gone to market. Because when I first had the idea, there was nothing out there for women unless they wanted to get pregnant. That was it. How much sooner we could have gone to market had the right team been working on this from the start. And we have an awesome team now. But how much sooner and better could we have gone to market had we had the right team? The software development is another thing that has caused me a lot of grey hairs and a lot of hair loss. And Ray, our wonderful CTO, is now fixing a lot of things. So if you want to ask him just how big of a mess that was, feel free to. This was the biggest kicker for this one was that there was a lot of engineers and software devs who didn't want to work on this initially. And because I didn't come from a technical background, I actually didn't know what I needed to ask them, what I needed to tell them. To me, it was just, here is what I want to do. My expectation is that you know what to do and you come back to me and tell me that, because that's how I operate, right? As a coach, as a personal trainer, my client comes to me, the expectation isn't that they're dictating to me what they need. I know what they need. And so the problem here was that, again, we picked the wrong team for this. What started as an 8-month timeline in our contract for them to develop this turned into 2.5 years. When they sent us the architecture from the software end, it initially said, all these lines that I was like, okay, cool, I don't understand any of that. I'll just send that on to the next person. That had a little section in the bottom that said languages, Swift and Java. I was like, okay, cool. And then they sent me an updated one. And me looking at all the diagrams, I was like, it's the same. I don't know what they've updated color, sure. And they did a nice little cheeky update of the languages in the corner, which I didn't understand, where they'd written all of iOS in Objective-C. And they had written, I heard that sound. And they had written Android in Kotlin, which is fine, whatever. That's not an issue. But the Objective-C was an issue because we had found new devs to take over at that point. And they went into GitHub and they were like, hey, sorry, we actually don't know how to work with Objective-C. A little bit of an error here. And so then you're spending, just before you're supposed to launch, rings are already sold now. You're going, shit, what am I supposed to do here? So we're working through that at the moment. Eventually we will rebuild into Swift, but that was a hard part. And this is why it's great now having someone else handle it, where I can just step back from that. But that was a really crappy part as well. And that was, again, another part of the journey where I didn't know what I needed to ask. I didn't know what I needed to ask them from a tech stack. Our contract said, and this was the real kicker, our contract said native languages, but it didn't specify what those languages were. And technically, I guess Objective-C can be native if you really want to get into it. But that was the really hard part. So again, it's like my own lack of knowledge from that end in what I could communicate to software devs, which I had hoped would know what I need, has now resulted in a build that is, I don't know, I would probably say probably a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, especially with the back end work. But, we're here and we'll work through it. And lastly, this is the last part of Femtek that I think was really important for me to chat about and get across, is just in terms of the ethics and the fact that we're actually collecting a lot of sensitive data from women. We had a lot of fear-mongering happening in Australia and worldwide, and half our customers are from the US. And we had a lot of fear-mongering that was going on in terms of delete your period app, because if you get an abortion and you're in a red state and they see that, you can go to jail and it's logged in your period app. Whereas realistically, all of that was a load of crap. And so what we have thought about, though, is that we are collecting a lot of sensitive data, and what happens if something like that gets leaked or if someone accesses that, because realistically there's no such thing as data that actually is safe. Like, everyone can some way penetrate if they're good enough, right? So for us, and I'm sure I'll find out that it wasn't actually done that way, even though I asked them to do that way, but that's now a rate problem. For us, a really big thing is that we have a removal of user and data. So we do have multi-factor authentication and a way to really set up your account to make sure that it's secure, but we have a complete removal of who that user is to what the data is collected. The idea is that we have, obviously, the way to collect that it is a woman who is breastfeeding and here is what has been collected, but we don't know that that is Sally who is logged at. And that was a really important thing, to have that separation of the two. Of course, if there was a subpoena and we had to go in, we would be able to, would have to find that. But at the end of the day, that was a really important thing for us. And that is something that has actually brought a lot of customers to Femtek. And what you hear a lot of women saying is they trust Femtek. Women trust women. They trust that our intentions are for the better good as well. They're willing to share a lot of their intimate private details with Femtek, whereas they don't want to share details of infertility with Apple, for example. So this was a really key part for us as well, where we can create something where ethically, yes, we're getting a lot of sensitive data, but we have completely removed who that person is from that data. And I think that was all that I had in my presentation. But thank you very much, guys. If there's anything you want to ask or chat about, please do find me after.
Thank you, Olivia. I think that it's really important for everybody in this room to hear a startup founder's journey and maybe heed some of the warnings in what Olivia is saying, because letting engineers go completely off-piste with hardware or software design and not managing them is something that we see time and time again in startups. And so if anybody does go on this journey, definitely check in on what your engineers are doing. I did want to open up the room for some questions because I think we do have time. I thought I would start by asking you a question just in relation to how you feel about a lot of the other wearables that are in the market. I realise I'm a bit of a defector right now because I'm wearing an Oura ring. Shame. But also just it's more of like a comment, and I welcome you to comment on that most of our smart devices and wearable technology, the algorithms are actually trained on male data. And so I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So they all are driven on male data. And if you go to any of the forums on Reddit where you actually look at Aura, you see a lot of women saying the same thing, where why are you not factoring in my period? Why can't I mark that my period? I actually feel good. My temperature's elevated. I'm in a phase of my cycle where everything is banging, yet you're telling me to rest and recover because my temperature is elevated, because for a male, when temperature is elevated, it means they haven't recovered. So it's all of, when you look at all of those algorithms, they are built on men with a small factoring in of women. And then when you look at a lot of the other wearables, they're specific to women who are trying to conceive. And that's it. Like that can be our only goal as a woman. We're trying to get pregnant. And that's what those wearables are for, which are great and have a great purpose, obviously. But yeah, a lot of these wearables, we don't look at them as competitors. We look at them as comparators. You can track the same thing, but that doesn't mean you're doing the same thing. And I think that's a big distinction for us. Yes, I can. Do you know, I hear this all the time when I'm watching recordings. I'm like, why doesn't anyone repeat the question? Then I'm standing here with like my dick in my hands being like, oh, I don't know. That's a good question. So the question was, what would be your advice to someone like hiring a team and how to avoid those same mistakes? Honestly, I don't have a good answer, and I wish I did. The team that I've brought on when I went through the interviewing process, there was a lot of gut feeling for me where I was actually just trying to find, are you on the same level that I am? In that, is your work ethic the same? I'm not saying I need you to be replying to a text message at 10 p.m., but when you're working, are you working? Are you putting in that effort, or are you just going, great, 38 hours, tick? So that was a really important thing for me, like through the interview process, where I'm asking them, what is your definition of excellence? And if you're telling me it's going above and beyond, like, great, fantastic, that's not a definition for me. So that was a big thing where you could just see how people wanted to excel. I think the next big thing was that I was really looking for staff that were senior and had a lot of experience, which is such a shitty thing, right? Because you think about everyone who comes out of uni and all of these industries, and they're fucking smart and they're like clued on and switched on. And then it's like, give me 5 years experience, give me 10 years experience. And unfortunately, for what our issue was now, it's like, you know, I look at Ray, who's 20 years deep tech. I'm showing his age. 22 years old. But he's got a shit ton of experience, right? So it's for the problems we have now. If someone was straight out of uni, they wouldn't know what to do with Objective C and our problem there. So I think that was a big thing where it was like, I'm looking for people who align with what my own morals are and how I show up to work, and crafting ways of asking that through the interview process, and also looking for the most senior people I could find who are way overqualified to be dealing with Femtek. He's dealing with space. Like, surely if you can deal with space, you can deal with Femtek. So that was my next thing. But back to what I said before, it's like, if you're finding people in the team, people who are experienced with startups more than anything, because they understand the hustle of a startup. They understand the limited funds in a startup. They understand that every month to month, it's like, shit, raise or die. Is this the last time that we can pay a paycheck? So they're putting in effort, and they're kind of treating your baby as their baby. Thank you. Thank you, technology. Deep Tech Melbourne. Anyone want to deal with that? So the question was just surrounding affiliations with universities and how you went about funding when, if there is any. So no, I actually don't have any affiliations with universities. So the investors that actually came on board to this point have all been angel investors and investors who are more so in that like women's health sphere and in the birthing world, in and really interested in women's health. So for them, it was a vision where they went, absolutely, I will put my money into this. Moving forward, obviously, that's a very different conversation because we're currently in a seed raise at the moment. And that has been a tricky part as well, because they do want to see, well, great, talk to me about the future. How are you going to get this to a software as a medical device? What is your affiliation there? So that has been a really tricky part. And that's something that I'm part of the Techstars program in Sydney, which I'm very fortunate that has been something that I have now at my disposal, where I have a lot of people I can get access to. But realistically, had it not been for Techstars, it would have been I don't know what I would have done at that point. I would have just kept trying to find investors and kept kind of chasing my tail. Definitely wouldn't have been in a position to have raised. So yeah, it's like things have kind of fallen into place, and I don't like to be like faffy and be like, oh, the universe, because I don't believe any of that. But it kind of feels like things have just clicked into place there. But the university affiliations is a big one that I'm looking for, to do trials, to get more validation, to get trust from women as well, more so we can see the difference in using the ring and tracking and how accurate that is versus just your period app, for example. So yeah, definitely looking if anyone has connections at any universities. My name is not Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah, so the question was just, what other, I guess, metrics are you using to confirm that the ring is accurate? So we have actually been using temperature methods. So when you look at temperature methods, they've actually been very successfully suppressed for the last, 1930s, like 90 years. No, 90 years, okay, 90 years. They've been suppressed really successfully. So they were actually used through the Catholic Church for natural protection, and they've been suppressed. So women don't know that temperature is a metric that you can use to confirm ovulation. There's certain rules to it, but that's what we've been actually basing it across. So we're basing it across by our own biometric data and oral temperatures. to look at what the ring is doing. In terms of blood work, if I was, because I've been the predominant tester of everything, if I was to use my oral temperatures, the BB ring, and then go and get blood work, it would all say the same thing.
Cool. Thank you, Olivia. There'll be time at the end so we can ask questions and all mingle together so we can save any more for then. So thank you.